Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Random Talk podcast, where we have meaningful conversation to understand the different forces that are shaping the digital world, more specifically, the AI world. Today, I'm extremely happy because we have a great guest, Payal Arora, who's the author of a brand new book, which I've read, which is From Pessimism to Promise. A small thing about brief about Payal Arora. Payal Arora is a professor of inclusive AI culture at Utrecht University, Netherlands. She's a digital anthropologist, a speaker, and author of award-winning books, including The Next Billion Users. But today we're going to focus on this book, and I read the book. I really love it, the book. Welcome about Payal Arora for this Random Talk podcast.
Thanks so much, and I'm really happy to be here.
Great. Just to show that I really love the book and I read the book, what I made is I made postcards from the book. Different postcards, which is quotable quotes from the book, right? And this was designed by my daughter. And in the front of it is you have, hope you can see it, you have quotable quotes from the book. And back you have a small bio profile of you and the book and random walk. So I'm going to use this postcards as a cue to trigger this conversation, right? And because
Yes, this is amazing.
thank you,
Something
thank you,
of its kind for me, so that's fabulous.
thank you so much. And I really, we really thought here, and we like to do things a little different here at Random Walk. And instead of just a normal conversation, we wanted to bring in more depth to it. So I'm going to start with the first quotable quote from the book, which I really loved, which is creativity is not the prerogative of the privileged. All right. Fantastic. And I'd like you to expand and explain more about this particular thing. It's a statement from your book.
Yeah, you really started with one of those juicy quotes because it really hits the nerve for why I wrote this book. Is in the last few years, particularly, I would say 6, 7 years, I've been really intensely working with the tech industry on many, creative tech industries, and time and again, I basically hear a standard stereotype is that what can we do to help the global south? How can we think creatively here so we can help them do X there, right? As if they have done the creative process for us and really the implementation is for the rest of the world. I've heard also multiple complaints from many colleagues who literally moved, like, people like yourself who moved from Silicon Valley and started working in India because they went for their family. Their parents are getting old, whatnot. And they said overnight they were treated like as people who had no ideas just by the fact that they were in India or in Malaysia or Philippines, whatnot. And they said, we are the same people, in California versus here. So
True.
there's
Very
something
true.
that happens that when they move to the global south, there's a new sort of paradigm that's created. And by the way, this really resonates with a key quote by Carly Fiorina, where when she was interviewed a decade and a half ago on what she thought about China and its innovative capacity before China became one of the formidable powers as it is today. And she was asked about whether they can innovate. And she said, are you crazy? The Chinese are imitative nations. They're not innovative nations. And there's no competition. And clearly she got that a little bit wrong, right? And this is something that is very permeating still, despite the fact that, we have vast amount of evidence. Whereas, when you look at the who is at the forefront of fintech or in renewable energy or so many other ways, like on processes, etc., it's still in the global south now. And yet, when you speak to people in the global north, particularly in the US, they believe that they need to come up with solutions for the most of the world, right? And so they
Yeah.
start from scratch.
Fantastic. See, for me, the revelation was TikTok, right? It's banned in India, but when it was still available to use in India, the tier three, four cities. the creativity from there, I never had access to it. And I was just blown away when first time I saw the kind of creativity, right, in terms of dance, singing. And so this one really resonated with me. It is not just the global south, but even within the global south, there are multiple layers where people like me from the city, we think that probably there's no creativity there down in the rural sector, right? But TikTok, and when I had access to that content, now probably they moved to YouTube Shorts or Instagram, I don't know. The creativity was unbelievable, and that's the reason it kind of resonated a lot with me.
Actually, that's really a very good point too, is that the positionality of thinking, okay, the West needs to understand the rest. Also, the rest needs to understand itself, because we've sort of like absorbed that kind of sort of thinking from the West, as if we are also, like this divisive nature or this sort of monolithic nature. But we also have to do our own work to undo it. And I myself am from a city, and I remember, like, I grew up in Bangalore. And when I went to Kuppam for the first time, I was shocked. I actually, to be honest, I expected it to be really like it's what Kuppam is, like a couple of hours away, but it felt like light years away, like you're in the middle of nowhere. That's how I perceived it. And I thought, oh, it must be really dirty and horrible, and people probably are doing nothing, and I need to come up with all the solutions. And I met so many engaged, interesting people, and it was, the farms are beautiful and clean. And I think I had an enormous amount of stereotype growing up in the city. And in fact, one can argue the cities are themselves like pretty, dirty comparatively. And, more importantly is we underestimate the fact that still majority of India, as well as many parts of the world, they live in tier 2, tier 3 and rural areas. They are the India. They are that. And this is where we keep getting that wrong, which means we're missing out on talent. We're missing out on ideas just because we have restricted ourselves to who we believe are capable. So absolutely, we have work to do internally.
Fantastic. I'll go on to next favorite quote of mine from the book, which is algorithm can be your friend. Fantastic, right? And in fact, a lot of people within the office kind of like this quote a lot. I want you to explain more about it.
Yeah, so, there's a move right now in the last few years that algorithms are oppressive, sexist, racist, which is again coming, it's not just from academia, but you see the mainstream headlines, in the Guardian, New York Times, particularly in the West, right? Is that the algorithms are just designed to be against society. And if you are basically trying to move forward, you need to resist AI. There's literally a book called Resisting AI. So this negative connotation is that we're not on the same side. So if we're engaging with the tech is the enemy, and we need to somehow manage around it, against it, break it up. And that's not the conversations happening in the rest of the world. The rest of the world, particularly young people, feel that they have more agency compared to their everyday realities. They live in like joint families. They're micromanaged to death, as we know, right? Like, and what are you wearing? Who are you going and talking to? What are you studying? Who did you go out with last night? I mean, it's like nonstop, right? And so you feel like you have no agency oftentimes in your life, these young people. But when they go online and they spend this extraordinary amount of time, they really get to understand why their audience, it's a relationship with the world, right? They build a relationship with different users as they build their profiles, and then they start to even co-create their content. And this sort of, in order to ensure that they're co-creating in the right way, they need to attend to what the algorithm is doing. Why does some content get more visibility than others? And so they come up with internal forums with other creators. They ask the users themselves. They look at the meta, the backend metric. And so through these ways, they're getting to understand the sentiment of of their user groups, their audiences. so as to shape the content in a way that continues and deeply resonates with their, shall we say, community they've built, right? And this is why they say that they look at it as an extension of themselves. And this is much like AI too. AI is now one could say, an extra pair of ears and eyes, because one of the things I keep hearing again and again is they can trust it more than they would trust a friend they would share their creative idea with, who
That's
may
right.
steal that idea, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's something well worth keeping in mind, actually.
Yeah, it kind of takes you to the next quote which I have here is diversity and culture are strengths, are not barriers, right? The different ideas and interactions that this global south and the youth is engaging with AI, far more positive than the Western countries, brings in a lot more diversity and ideas, right? Means this is something which I kind of knew it, but you kind of hit the point so very clearly in the book.
Yeah, no, thank you. Firstly, I'm so impressed by all the homework. Like, I actually feel like you've really done that. Now I need to reach out to you for getting those postcards. I want those postcards.
In fact, what I'm going to do is, as part of the things, we're going to make two copies of this postcards. We have
Oh,
about 10 of them. We're going to mail it to you.
oh,
That was
that's
part of the plan.
that's
That was part of that was part
awesome.
of the plan, and we're going to post this two sets of postcards. Each will have about 10. You want more copies? We can mail it to you. Yeah.
That- That's fabulous. Thank you. No, but and so going to this quote, right? Like, just
Mhm.
look at what's happened now. You have open AI, which obviously is taking the world by storm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then we have Quen, which is the Chinese version of OpenAI. And even though they're a little late in the game, they've already are going to overtake OpenAI. Why? Because they have done something that OpenAI is not doing, is that they're really genuinely investing in diverse languages. So they
Mhm.
are, training their data sets with that. They are like investing in a genuine way of making it more responsive in Urdu, Bengali,
Interesting.
Burmese. And so what's happening is that the data sets are becoming much smarter social linguistically, because it's not just the language or the dialect, it's the way we speak. We all have slang. Like
Very
just
true.
the other day, my team in India said, "Oh, wheatish complexion. That's how we should label content." That
Okay.
term is an Indian thing. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's English, right? But
Yeah.
it's also English, right? Like, we
Yeah.
have come
Yeah.
up way of talking, which
Mhm.
and so we're also looking at data labeling. How do
Yeah.
you label data in ways which will allow for optimization of a product or service which targets it, because it's based on the prompting? And if people ask things in acronyms, in slang, that system has to be really like adept at understanding the systems and this way of speaking and thinking, right? So there's so much of that which is missed. And so diversity here will be the strength, in the sense that we've seen this also in many parts of Africa, where there are a lot of startups. On the surface, looks like they're doing like any other startup, like editing software or coming up with local solutions for urban planning. It's nothing great, except they are building their own large language models in their own dialects and languages, which means that they will have a upper hand compared to a foreign startup that tries to be more like as effective in these contexts, right? After all, like, majority of young people live in the global south, so it is a market for everybody in the future, for sure. If not already, it should be, right?
Fantastic. Very true, right? In terms of uh, in when you look at startups here in India and also in the global south, the excitement for tech is so optimistic. But I don't know, because of Black Mirror or many of this new age science fiction that is getting shown in Netflix and the Western countries, they have a very different view of all the new tech, and they have a fear, right? But here it is the optimism in terms of ability to, without any fear, use this tech, and because it really enables them. And that was one of the biggest takeaway from me from the book, right? I probably knew these things in a way, kind of because being here and talking to people. But the depth of research that you have done and your team has done to showcase this optimism is something which I think everyone should learn, right? And that optimism is the only one that is going to flourish the new generation of creativity innovation that's going to come from the south, and which kind of leads me to the next quote, which is include world majority in our emotional repository, right? I really like this quote, right? World's majorities uh, include it in the emotional repository. So when you're designing things, making products, or creating solution, do not have a myopic view. This is my taking, but I want you to explain more on this quote here.
No, absolutely. Because one of the things I keep, I've been repeating over these years, and because I feel like it's my mission, because this comes from a development mindset from, in the 1940s, basically, towards the global south. Like, okay, these are beneficiaries, and technology is utility driven. Okay, so if we insert a phone, a computer into X community, they will search for jobs, and look for ways to learn. It's like healthcare information, a very developing paradigm. Whereas, as you brought up even earlier, TikTok, for example, and other kinds of applications, we see that there's so much creativity which is playful, fun, means something. It touches your heart, and it's one of the fundamental reasons why people get online and stay online. It's not because, oh, I'm going to hunt for a job, right? Like many of young people feel they feel at home online because they get to meet people like themselves, because maybe they don't and they can't in maybe their village in Gurgaon, or in the Himalayas where I was, or you feel isolated. What if you're a gay person in Uganda, where it's criminalized to be that gay person, right? Then you find a community online. Like, so there's all these reasons why and if we can't understand the emotional reasons why people go and feel so strongly about the internet, then we'll never get them. I mean, this goes not just to what it is right now, but what they want to be. So there's this aspirational drive. Like, I have a global friend. Like, even my own nephew, when he was a, kid, he would say, oh yeah, I'm going to meet up with my gang from Ireland, and, all this. He was having more conversations on the game platform with, these kids from Ireland and all these other contexts, and he was looking at their lives and their mom like saying, get off the computer, and, and that's, I think there's something about that, is you feel like a part of something beyond what you're born into.
That's very true, because one of the early days in which I got enticed by the whole internet is ability to connect with various user groups and the community which had, I was probably interested in open source. So you had a very active community of open source, and any different interest, right? You had people there where you can connect and have a conversation, whether it's a ham radio or different. For me, it was kind of a geeky little nerdish kind of a thing, but later on, I went on to comics and other things. But even those are, I think, can be labeled as geeky stuff. But that was the interest for me in the early days of internet. Then it became more of a business utility and corporate and other things. But the earlier part was a fun way to connect with people, people of your kind, right? And I completely agree. And the new generation of this global south youth are able to tap into the same energy that triggered the first revolution of internet.
Yeah, and the thing is, if we don't recognize that, by the way, which is, there's something really hopeful also about that, because in this time of polarization and fragmentation, we're going, especially in the West, they're going inward, right? You listen to the politics, whether it's Europe or the US, it's like America first, the European fortress. How do we prevent those people from coming in, etc., etc.? It's, or what's going to happen to our culture? What they mean is like, God forbid, like, our culture is going to be, taken over. Whereas there's a completely different mentality. If look at the Indian young people consuming K-pop,
Yeah,
it on the surface, what do we have in common? It seems like completely different cultures, but
yeah,
that to me is really hopeful, because you have Nigerians consuming Bollywood and
yeah.
Tollywood, like They can lip sync on TikTok with no, and
Yeah,
there's all these profiles and interesting, which means that the emotional is pervasive across cultures and is hitting the nerve, for people and building different kind of groups, which reminds us that we can still, be optimistic about a global public, and shared cause, which is not just about negative, you know, negative aspects. Like if you think about whenever they think in global terms in the last few years, it's like Black Lives Matter or something. It's all
yeah,
about the anti. Like how do
yeah,
we come together because we are resisting or we are against X, Y, Z, but not
mhm,
about coming together. But the pandemic was interesting, right? That was a
yeah,
silver
yeah,
lining.
yeah, yeah,
A lot of residents from different parts of the world, singing outside their windows, for example, like all sorts of viral content, and people got it. Like it didn't matter if they didn't understand the language, the culture, everything, and they saw them in a very humanized way. It
very
was
true, very true.
that's one thing.
Another one, which for me it was an eye opener from the book, was the quote: "Empathy is not intrinsic value; it is a learned process." And you kind of derived that from an experiment that was done. And for me, I thought people say that you should have empathy, but it kind of a slight light bulb moment for me to realize that empathy is can be a learned process, and we need to cultivate that. I want you to explain a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So absolutely. Like even I, to be honest, thought empathy is almost something that we have, right? I
Yeah,
took it
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, but then like you said, oh, well, do you have empathy? We literally
yeah,
do it in language, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I had this class exercise where I give an example of this AI enabled drones being used in different parts of Africa to help, conservationists detect poachers entering these, preserved areas who are out to kill the elephants and rhinos, etc. And
Yeah, yeah,
so basically alert them to say, okay, here there are these poachers, so you need to get there in time. And I asked my class, what would you do to add value to the design and design to
yeah, yeah.
optimize? And they said, oh, we should do the shoot to kill. They should just shoot the ranger. And I
Mm,
said, okay, and let's shift the context. And what if we were to do the same thing in Amsterdam,
yeah,
and we saw somebody going to get violent with a rare koala bear or something, right? Would you shoot to kill? They're like, of course not. We are a civilized nation. We have rules of law. We can't just shoot people. And I say, okay, what's the difference? And they had no answer. There was like a real silence because they didn't see. They said that's different, right? But no difference. And I think this is where I realize this abstract is easy to like. People are disposable in the global south because they just and this goes from our propaganda over decades from the population bomb theory, which by the way still is sticky even with the climate crisis. They still blaming the rest of the world for energy consumption, which creates false policies when we know majority of energy consumption still happens in places like the US, disproportionate population. But these myths are so deeply rooted in our own brain, including even in India, many of my own family speak about there's too many of us, you know, but blaming ourselves for something which is not, not that we don't have work to do. So I think this is where I feel like we really need to come up with a counter narrative, recognize these narratives are not true to our everyday reality, and to fundamentally humanize, many parts of the world which has been systematically dehumanized over decades. Because then you can't treat them as legitimate consumers, users, and just people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.